It's an Archaeodeath interview with Professor Howard Williams and his guest.
Welcome everyone to another Archaeodeath interview with myself, Professor Howard Williams, and a special guest. And this time we have Barbara. Barbara, please introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners.
Yes, hello. So my name is Barbara Veselka. I am a bioarchaeologist, which means basically that I look at human remains. And in my case, I like to look at them whether they are burnt or unburnt, and to actually extract or squeeze out the much information we have out of basically the only direct remains we have from the past, from past individuals.
Barbara, it's been really exciting to talk to you again. I say again because while we haven't done an Archaeodeath interview before, of course, Femke and myself interviewed you for the latest book of ours, The Cremation in the Early Middle Ages. So you're one of our wonderful special guests in that context. But I really wanted to just have a conversation for YouTube viewers and listeners about all of the different strands of your research as a bioarchaeologist. I mean, as a starting point, I mean, how did you get to be a bone specialist, a human remains expert, a boffin, a white lab coat wearing, lab type archaeologist?
Well, that's an interesting question indeed. I've been asked many times, did you always want to be a bioarchaeologist? Was like, no, that means that if I was 4, I would like to look at dead people. It wasn't that bad already. So I kind of always wanted to do something in archaeology, being kind of infected by the Indiana Jones, the whole notion that it would be a real archaeologist. Obviously, I learned later that is absolutely not the case. But anyway, I found it cool to visit stuff. So I did a master's looking at the ancient peoples of Mexico, and we went there for a dig. And I was supposed to do pottery. And I have nothing against pottery, but I just found out that human remains are way cooler, which is, of course, a very late stage to realize when you're doing your master's thesis on pottery. Anyway, we were helping out with a dig, and I was like, oh my God, yes, this is what I want to do. And then kind of life got in the way. I got a super boring job, but making money, blah, 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 2 kids. Anyway, and then I started feeling there's something missing. I need to do something else. This is not what I was meant to do. Anyway, so I went back to the university, and then I did the osteoarchaeology, which was then available. So before that, you couldn't do human remains outside the medical profession, at least not in the Netherlands. And so actually I started with the new master, and I was instantly smitten. I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And so then I suddenly turned into someone that looks at dead people in all kinds of ways, which is a very interesting change indeed. But yeah, like I said, I think the beautiful thing about studying human remains is trying to unravel their identities. Who were they? What did they experience? What can we still tell? It's like these time capsules that we have, but then on people. And as archaeologists, we try to reconstruct the past and behavioral patterns and social organizations and stuff like that. And what I like is that actually I'm trying to reconstruct who were these people. So that is how I actually got in love with looking at human remains. And like I said before, it's whether it's inhumations or cremations. So a large part of the world has cremated remains as a important funerary practice, and so tying to the cremations in early medieval times, it was an amazing opportunity to write a chapter on the different developments, because in the very beginning, like in the 1950s and even until the 1970s, cremated remains were just either scary things you can't say anything about, or we'll just dump them. We have this beautiful urn, let's dump the contents. And what I'm happy about is that somewhere around 2015, it really the amount of research increased, and what we can do now and the developments we see now is that we are more and more capable of unraveling the identities of the persons that got cremated, which I also discuss in the contribution,
Yes.
and I was very happy to do so. Yeah, it's so actually it's promoting the research on cremations because of cremated remains, I must say, because it can tell so much more than we initially thought.
I mean, it's before we get into that a little bit more detail. I mean, just for it's something that I forget because, well, we both I think forget because we're so used to dealing with the dead that so much of the celebrity stories of discoveries of our mummified human remains intact skeletal remains, where we can sort of almost like, it feels like we're coming face to face with the past, whether it's bog bodies or
Yeah.
a rich Iron Age chieftain's grave, or
Yeah.
we feel we've got that sort of direct line, and yet rather than getting less important, it's even more important that we deal with the fragments, the disturbed burials, the deliberately burnt burials, the cremations. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I think is so important about your work. And I think so much of our headline grabbing bioarchaeology is about the best preserved, when often, well,
Yeah.
that is really cool stuff. It's only a fraction of what we end up studying. I mean, so much of what you've been looking at, I remember you said in your project you're going through museum stores at stuff that's never been looked at for decades, and it's sitting there, but it's telling such important new information with new techniques.
Yeah, no, I fully agree, and I think especially the cremated remains, since it was such a vast period. We're speaking about from late Neolithic to early medieval times. It's not a century; it is centuries, and we're just missing this part of how the dead were treated, what people thought, how different apparently how different their intentions or maybe their visions or beliefs were, because fire is a powerful transformer. You transforms instantly from something into something totally different. So there's a huge emotion and it's a whole show that is going on. And I think I'm happy that we finally tackling this, maybe challenging category, but I do believe we still can get gripping headlines. I mean, I must say, I tried to sell one of my publications and I couldn't. It was one of the few osteobiographies on a cremated individual. It was a lady with a fetus. Obviously, I can't prove it's hers, but she had all this pathology going on in her spine, and basically she was one of several cremated remains within certain amounts, and she was the only one that was complete. So something was going on. That she was not divided up, not distributed, but she was anyway as a whole. So I tried to make a story, but clearly people still think that cremated remains is maybe something you can't tell enough of, or what is it telling us? But yeah.
Barbara, was that a Bronze Age burial, or are you talking?
Yeah.
And when you say sell, I mean you're trying to pitch it to a journal because it's such an exceptional, and they're just going, oh, that's not interesting. That's really frustrating.
It's super frustrating. I tried 3 times, and I realized it's a case study. Yeah, so case studies. We all have our opinion about case studies. If we don't do them, we won't know. But if we do them, it's just a case study. But I thought it was such a beautiful example of the whole distribution notion. As people that are used to dealing with cremated remains by pure nature are suited to be distributed. So how do you create connections with ancestors, with living people, with society? You do that by distribution. We still have it today. People use ash from their deceased loved ones and turn it into a diamond or wear it around their neck. So there is this distribution or reciprocity or connection going on. And I think this was a beautiful case where maybe she was in a certain stage, maybe she was visibly pregnant if the fetus was hers. Then there was, and she had some kind of lower back pain or wasn't able to walk, and there was something going on with her. And it kind of was, again, one of the few times we get a glimpse of maybe the social things going on. I was like, it's such a shame no one believes in it enough to get it out there. In the end, I got it out there in a different way, so all's good. But it kind of stresses maybe what you're saying, that people still seem to struggle with cremated remains. I don't know.
It is because it's a kind of twisted thing, because we are cremating nations. Most of Northwest Europe is now majority. I think it's all majority cremation to different frequencies. Between 60 to 80% of us, we will be burned apart after death, and yet we still think. And actually, you know what? I keep trying to remind my students this. But many of the archaeological monuments you can go and visit, while you can't see the cremations, they're built in relation, if not over primary cremations. Cremation is an important part of the story. Most of the Bronze Age burial mounds in the uplands of Wales, for example, I mean, they're not exclusively to do with cremation, but cremation is an important part of their story. And yet we kind of can't get our heads around ancient cremation, and that's very frustrating.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you got it out there, eventually. But yeah,
Yeah.
it is. There is a intellectual reluctance, because I think those stories need to be told, even if they're just telling us something. We don't have all the answers, but that's true of every burial context. There's always questions.
Exactly. How much can you prove? And if you just
Yeah.
stick to the facts, I mean, I'm all for facts. Yeah, you need to build your story on facts. But if I would just tell dry facts, no one would read them either. So,
No.
and I think allowing people, and maybe we need to do this more, and there needs to be more room for interpretation. So, I mean, I get burned all the time for having too wild interpretations because I can't prove it. But in the end, I recognize it's a theory, but what if you allow researchers to think, in the sense like interpret? What if this, to come back to that woman, what if she was visibly pregnant and maybe, had back pain, and she had this different,
And
she
that
was
made her life story different, and therefore her treatment.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then we have someone that is different within a Bronze Age society. She was buried within a mound, which means she was part of society, but in the mound she had her own mound. So a mound within a mound. I mean, it's
Wow.
super special. So she was not, if I may say so, not seen as something, a freak or
Marginal.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, or like a marginal. She was part of society. She was exactly buried the same way, but separate nonetheless. And I think that's mind blowing. And instead of, disregarding it, of saying, yeah, well, you can't prove it. Yeah, but it is what we have. We don't have written sources for the Bronze Age, which means we have to do interpretations. And I think if you let your creativity roam, and maybe even come up with wild, idiotic theories, at least we're allowed to think about it and
Absolutely.
try to reconstruct some of this amazing society that's so difficult to capture.
And it's so difficult to get both other academics and the wider population interested, as you say, if we just have the dry descriptions. And the power of your studies is that you can range from big, across temporal, massive timescales, massive geographical regions, down to the intimate stories of how one person's tragic end was honoured by loved ones, by family, by relations,
Exactly.
by friends. And that's the way you can, that's the power of our stories, and we've got to explore that. I always think, I don't know what you think about this, is that it's not so much people writing things that are difficult to verify, but I think we need to be more honest about having alternative interpretations set out as scenarios, so that people can pick that up and go, and now we've got some more data 2, 3 years, 10 years on this scenario, whereas so much of when we do that interpretation, the pressure is on us to come up with a definitive, this is the most convincing answer.
Yes.
When
Actually, and I disagree with that, because that suggests that my interpretation is the correct one.
Yeah.
And so although we go for the most likely, I do want once in a while to have the freedom to do something insane. To suggest something super insane. Why? Because it keeps us out of the box. It helps us to spot the one that is actually special. That we try to not be confined by our own minds and by our own society and by the way we look at things. And I think when you allow yourself, I don't know, once in a while to say, okay, I have like 5 options why we could explain this. And the most insane one is this. And of course, everyone will say, no. But then again, it's out there and it helps people to think about it. And I do think that if you give some room for that, that we just might, spot the intimate stories, the personal ones that actually, it's what we want. We don't want to just gather data, 25,000 potsherds and a couple of bones. No, we want to say, what did the people do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in your case, are there other examples from your research on staying with cremation for the moment, because I know we want to get on to look at some other interesting studies you've done, but I mean, are there any other interesting sort of more population level or cemetery level studies that you've done?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that shed that light on that more sort of that story, so we can tell.
Yeah, well, recently I published a paper on a large cemetery, late Bronze Age, early Iron Age cemetery in the Netherlands, Tilburg, and because it was such a unique opportunity, because usually the excavations are done as a rescue. excavation, which
Yes.
means that a developer will destroy, hence the developer needs to pay, we need to salvage whatever is going to be destroyed, and that is it. And now we agreed we're going to do the entire part, so a huge part, which means that finally we get the opportunity to look beyond the odd, 10, 15 cremated remains, like is what's going to tell you, So we had 230 graves. It's a huge
That's
amount.
big.
I
That's
know,
huge.
right? So there
Yeah.
was an amazing opportunity. Unfortunately, the developer was also on board. It was like, okay, well, I know it's going to cost me a huge amount of money, but let's then do it the way it should be. It's like, yes, good. So we did everything. We did the charcoal, pottery, seeds, whatever, everything. It's micro CT scanning the urns, whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
And even no, I was so happy with this opportunity. And then you see why it is important. I mean, you don't have to do always everything, but interestingly, so I osteologically analyzed the 230 cremated remains, and it was good. I mean, I was happy. A fair amount of women, fair amount of biological women, fair amount of biological males, and then we had some non-adults, so all good. We had a number of features, so ring ditches, flat graves. We had some were buried in clusters, some were buried separately, but there wasn't a pattern to be found, at least not demography connecting to ring ditches or so nothing. We also did a large amount of strontium. We did 109 graves we did strontium isotopes on.
Wow.
To be able to see if we see something happening with mobility. And interestingly enough, there was this huge difference between males, females, and non-adults. And what it turned out that the males were getting their food from somewhere else than the females and the non-adults. And so while initially this looked like, okay, all the females and the non-adults are, migrants coming in, that doesn't really make sense. But then obviously we needed to look at the baseline because, just summing up values doesn't really do the trick. And then we saw that there is this, geologically complex area, and the women and the children were eating from a very specific tiny area of land within the vicinity of the cemetery, and the dudes were eating from another area. And
so it's not that they come from far away. They're exploiting a broader. Okay, right.
Yeah. So and because it is super difficult to say something about diet in cremated remains, we're now in our university exploring the potential of strontium concentrations and also another element of strontium to see if we can say something about diet. And anyway, the strontium concentrations suggested that they were not necessarily eating something different. So it's not like the females ate apples and the males ate cows, but it was more like they're both eating apples, just not from the same region. Which means that if you, and then my brain started to work. How does that work in reality? Yeah. So mom eats sandwich from 2 blocks away, and dad eats sandwich from 2 blocks the other way. Why? This is intriguing. I mean, it could have been mobility, but then like really regional mobility. And I'm sure that in that time there was more mobility going on than perhaps we can assess.
Sure.
Yeah, but to conclude that for your daily sandwich, you would travel 50 kilometers. Yeah, not really convincing, right? So
no.
But there was this, so apparently it mattered, and apparently it mattered what biological sex you had and which age, because also the non-adults. And then you see it, also you saw it changing in some of the non-adults, so, but it was not statistically significant. But what I did say was, hey, maybe the ones that are changing are the non-adults that are male. And that at a certain time, when you're considered to be adult male, you change your diet.
So there's it doesn't have to be your entire diet, but some substantial, sustained, until point of death, change is taking place. They're eating or consuming something.
Yes.
The only adult males are getting that.
So maybe there was this huge man cave thing going on. Once you were allowed to be part of the man cave population, then you all went to go, I don't know, chew on apples or grass or whatever it was.
You've been enjoying this wonderful cooking, but now you can have
No,
the rubbish.
you're a man.
food.
Yeah.
I
No
don't
more
know.
cooking for mum. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating though, isn't it? Yeah. So there's obviously again, it's a really crazy example just of how stable isotope analysis being applied to cremated material, but also how we are revealing new patterns, but we don't always have the exact answer. But it's taking us so much further forward. I mean,
it's again a glimpse into a social construction, and maybe this just applies for Tilburg. So that's why we need more research to see if this pattern, persists. And interestingly enough, there was also one non-adult that just didn't come out of the Netherlands, or so it seemed, compared to the baselines we have now, because everything falls and stands with the correct baseline.
Yes.
And it seems that the person could have been originating from Belgium or maybe
Really?
Germany, but I don't have the baselines for Germany. But and so also the pottery that was found suggested that it connected to a certain kind of culture group within Belgium. And so, but it's like more than 150 kilometers away, and a non-adult, which means that already, I don't know, around adolescence, so either after death or shortly before death, this adolescent moved 150 kilometers further away. I mean, this is intriguing. So, it gives rise to thoughts like, okay, how were these social networks then? What is the extent of these networks? How far does it go? And how free are you? And this whole intriguing notion that you might eat the same, but just not from the same area. Wow. Yeah. Why?
And these are communities that share. I mean, it's not typical for cremation to be the dominant rite. There's so much variability, but here you've got a community, at least the people we can see, they're almost all or completely all cremating. So they share that ritual. They share. Yeah.
But over long distances. So there is so much, I think the connection between different communities is so much more than we think. And I know it's difficult because this is also part of we're kind of hindered by facts. So if you don't find facts, it's not something you want to venture in that direction. But actually we should. The whole notion that, going to visit neighbors, well, maybe the neighbors were 100 kilometers away. Yeah. And you don't just make it a day trip as we do because we're way too busy with everything, but they make it into a week trip. Why not? Yeah. But then it opens up whole new possibilities of exchange, the exchange of ideas, the exchange of people, And so we need these, again, we need the studies of cremated remains, because it's telling us about people that did not leave any form of historical record. So everything we can squeeze out is needed for us to understand these populations so far back.
Well, that's really fascinating, Barbara, and that gives. We've talked. I've had other Archaeodeath interviews with people talking about Roman cremation, early medieval cremation, but not only for that period, but in terms of the application of new techniques and such a great sample size. That really is a great case study for viewers and listeners. But I want to take us off cremation, if I dare, because while we could talk for hours about burning things, and I want to hear about this article that you and colleagues published recently in the journal Antiquity, and I'm not sure how to pronounce the place name, but I'd love to hear more about it. So this blew my mind, and but then equally we find a lot of crazy stuff in the archaeological record. If I don't know if I should call it crazy is fair.
It's okay.
Unexpected things, or things that challenge our expectations. But this is absolutely exceptional. So Barbara, tell us about this grave.
Yeah, so this was an unexpected treasure, I like to call it. And it was part of, we initially embarked on this Crumble project, looking at all kinds of old cremated remains collections in these museums. And I got this site, Pomerol, and we also got a box with inhumated remains. And initially we were like, not part of the scope of the project. But since I like inhumated remains as well, I said to my boss, well, just let me look at it, won't cost me that much. It was like, oh, okay, for crying out loud, okay. And it's like, something's fishy, something doesn't add up. I think it's cool. So anyway, I started digging, not literally, but kind of literally. Is that, and then so we came up with the notion, or I came up with the notion, like, okay, maybe this is a reconstructed individual. And already macroscopically, and of course that is not a very strong characteristic, because we are not super symmetrical. There's always some form of asymmetry going on. But in the end, I mean, the spine of an individual will show the same age, and not, you know, unfused vertebrae and fused vertebrae. That is weird. That's beyond weird. Yeah. And in the end, the femur, one of the femora didn't fit into the acetabulum of one of the pelvis. So it was clear something's fishy is going on. These bones do not belong to one individual. Okay, so then we did some genetic, so DNA analyses, to be super sure. And yes, indeed, there are at least 5 individuals that donated a body part to this individual, females, males, and all of them not related. And that was also what I wanted to know, because it would, you know, it would seem like so my interpretation was this: you constructed a common ancestor because it was done post-mortem, and several people donated their body parts and they were not related, which means that potentially you wanted to create a common ancestor that wasn't there. And how do you do that? By combining them and just saying, this is our ancestor, right? And anyway, so we also did some radiocarbon dating, and it turned out that the entire skeleton was Neolithic, apart from the skull. Yeah. And the skull turned out to be Roman. But the problem was we used up all the good collagen for DNA. And somehow the radiocarbon dating wouldn't go. We tried 3 times of the remaining part of the skull, but it wouldn't. And it happened more often that even though, for instance, collagen quality is poor, you can still get a good DNA profile. But if collagen is poor, you can't get a radiocarbon date out of it. Anyway, then we got a super smart researcher from, I think, Max Planck Institute, who developed, it was Harald Ringbauer, who developed the identity by descent, so kind of counting the sequences and looking at the profile. And it turned out that the skull was Roman because the skull is directly related, so the individual who owned the skull was directly related to a pair of siblings in Tongeren, which is 120 kilometers away from Pomerol, towards the Dutch border. So Pomerol is close to the French border and Tongeren is close to the Dutch border. And there was a pair of siblings, and the woman, the skull of the woman was directly related to them. And if you count the segments, she can't be older than the Roman period. So by using the DNA, we managed to squeeze out some kind of date. And in the end, what we had was an individual. So it was buried like an individual, but at least 5 individuals donated a body part, one of which was a Roman woman. So not necessarily that she donated, but deceased or the loved ones from the deceased donated her skull to that individual. And so this was, then of course you have to answer the why. So, okay, these are the facts, yeah? So these are a bit of dry facts. Okay, cool. Now what? What happened? Who did it? So first of all, we need to eliminate, no, the original excavators didn't do it, because we all have, there unfortunately are situations where this happened. So
yeah, you have accidents, don't you? People mix things up.
So that wasn't the case. And fortunately, we had one of the few original excavation photographs. So even though it was excavated by amateur archaeologists, which means we have not the documentation we would like, no. We still had, and we were very happy with the original photograph, where you see the individual lying in the sand, and you can't fake it. If you would have constructed it and then took the photograph, you would see it. So anyway, and so basically what we did, we sampled all the long bones that were visible on the picture to see if they're, if it was the same individual and if there was some kinship. And anyway, so they're actually, so what I did was not give one interpretation because I still can't prove it. So we have interpretation 1, the Neolithic people did it. And then the Romans accidentally, when digging holes to put their cremated remains in, just destroyed the head of the person that was there, or there was no head, and then thought, oh my goodness, the dead or will be super angry, so we'll add a skull from our own. Or they actually found Neolithic bones in the Roman period, reconstructed an individual and added their skull. So either way is fine. I don't know which one. I'm leaning towards the Neolithic people did it, because we all know, to use your words, Howard, Neolithic people did crazy stuff with their dead.
They did. Come on, I know that there's a
right?
Neolithic archaeologist watching this going, no, you can't say that. You know, they were all a bit weird.
Yes, and if I say special, then it's also a wrong word. So I don't know. Remarkable things. Anyway, we know. I mean it respectfully. So
yeah.
And yeah, then the why, of course, and that is where I really wanted to, put in my weird interpretation. So anyway, the whole interpretation is that started with a group of people wanted connection. And how do you connect? How do you, I compared it in my head to, we all have this aunt and uncle in the family that are not really aunt and uncles. Just because they're super nice people, you say to them, I have friends, and when my kids were little, they called them aunt this and uncle that, but they weren't really. And if you see it like that, you can create connectivity or even kinship by saying it is. And it seemed to me like they created this common ancestor to unite bloodlines that were not united before. And of course, you can do that by marriage and children, but apparently there was a need for this connection. And so you united maybe tribes or households or whatever. I mean, I know these terms have all their different connotations, but the whole point is you unite at least 5 groups of people, not genetically related, and they create a common ancestor. And can you imagine what that would be? So that would mean, for instance, peace. We're now connected. So, we don't kill each other anymore. We don't go to war, or we are free to trade, or we live close to each other. And so how vital this individual must have been that was created with a specific purpose. It was, wow. Yeah.
So I read this paper and I'm still trying to get my head around it, and it's absolutely compelling. I'm fascinated by, this was a reasonably well distributed in the press event, wasn't it? Did you get any other theories coming back from the public, or any unexpected reactions to this? Was it how did you get any of that kind of public feedback?
I was hoping for it, but most of them agreed with me, which is nice. But I don't always look for agreement. It was like, if there's someone that knows, has a better idea or whatever, because but no, for now it's mostly agreeing, and I do believe that, I mean, connecting people, I mean, it is a form of connection. Something was going on. There was some connection, some bond constructed, and it had to be so powerful that it crossed, to the world of the dead. So it means the afterlife. So you have to be connected in the afterlife. And it's such a powerful connection of the group of people. I wouldn't be surprised if it was this vital, maybe a survival strategy or whatever. There were other people coming in, and if we unite, then we're loyal to each other. We can say we're one family. Anyway, I can go on for hours, but and I mean, there are other examples. In Klaat-Helland, and in the other one, I've always Knip Headland. And there are others. So but because we don't find them that often, because they're, I think, also not meant to be in a maybe visible cemetery, or it was in the past. So people would know where this individual was. And the same goes for the other reconstructed individuals. There is this special thing going on. You feel the need to combine. And then I do believe you need to be remembered. So either going back to the place or seeing it from a distance. Okay, well, there lies our common ancestor. Children, look, that's the sacred space. Something like that. And what it is giving us is in something that we can hardly ever reconstruct is what is going on in their minds,
Yes.
in their emotions, in their needs. Yeah.
Exactly, and this is both the fascinating but frustrating aspect of funerary archaeology. Is it gives us that tantalizing glimpse of a different world, and with
Yes.
different understandings of the dead and of what these remains may have meant, and handling them, creating new connections, and how those remains, whatever the scenario, by thousands of years later, that either a grave was found and augmented, or all of the remains were brought. It does show how these people are interacting with their landscape. They weren't archaeologists,
No.
but they were digging, they were finding, because this was near the Roman cremation burials, wasn't it? So
Yeah, exactly. So slightly on
yeah.
a lower level. And it was in the vicinity of a river. So I know that rivers, are powerful features in the landscape. They're life givers, but they're also, can create death. So I do believe that the river has something to do with it.
Yeah.
And maybe in the Neolithic landscape, it looked a bit different. I also recall that I was thinking about where did it come from. So it could have been that underlying everything was a huge Neolithic cemetery. Although Neolithic cemeteries are not huge, and there are for instance, a lot of caves in Belgium, especially. But the nearest cave is like 80 kilometers away. And so I was thinking, can you see these persons? One is carrying a femur, the other one is carrying an arm, and it was a coordination, because we had no doubles. So it wasn't like, oh, dude, you came up with the right femur. I said left femur. Now we have two right femurs.
Yeah.
No, there was this meticulous coordination, no doubles. We constructed, by the way, exactly the way it should be. And I had a lot of comments like, yeah, how do they know anatomy? Well, I think they know the average Neolithic person knew anatomy way better than the average person today. Why?
Yeah.
Because death and bones and corpses were super part of life. And if you wait long enough, you see how it is. I mean, I think the odd Neolithic child knows more about bones than any of us. So because you see it every day. And if you go back to the caves, where you have these collective burials, there would have been bodies in various stages of decay. And then you see all these bones. It's like super logical Lego. It's not a question. Of course, you know where it goes. And so it's not about knowledge of anatomy, is just knowing where it goes. Yeah.
Fascinating stuff, Barbara. And I suppose this leads to a couple of sort of not final reflections or questions for you. Is I mean, every time I talk to you or I've met you, it re-engages me with the subject I'm supposed to be enthusiastic about already, and I just go up to 11 with enthusiasm just hearing about this new research. And do you feel, I mean, obviously you're very optimistic in the way you're talking about the discoveries you're making. How do you feel about the broader field of research? Is it a time where we're facing particular challenges, or is it a good time for the because of these new discoveries? How are you feeling about bioarchaeology, osteoarchaeology, and what's going on? What's your thoughts on the field?
Yeah, so on one hand, I'm super happy that we're making so much technological advancements, and on the other hand, the technological advancements give us, to say it bluntly, more dry data. And although the dry data is super important, I'm sometimes missing the more social components. So on one hand, I'm super happy that we get to, find out more about like exactly what people were eating. We're doing sequential denting, so you can do diet throughout life, and you have all this amazing data. But and it's not that researchers are not doing it, but it's just maybe more also for me, reflecting on how I approach my research, is that I want to have more on interpretation, to have more on the social dynamics. What does it mean? Oh, great. They ate apples and pears, and then they had fish, and then they had apples again, and then they ate meat. Good for you. But what does it mean?
Yeah.
Why? The why. Yeah. And I know the why will be always difficult. Like you said, we hardly ever have a definitive answer. But I do think that we should allow ourselves. And that's why I'm happy with this opportunity, Howard, because now I can rant, and no reviewer is burning me, But I do think, and that's why it's valuable that we do these kind of things apart from the official, articles, where you just limit it in how much you can, I don't know, ponder about the various implications. And I do believe we need to do that. I do believe that we need to go beyond like Tilburg, I could make it very dry. Okay, the females were coming, eating something else. None of those also, males were doing this. Cool. C'est ça. No, why? What does it mean? We want to know what it means, because this is a kind of the first clue in differences. And a lot of the differences are not archaeologically visible, because I know there was a difference. I know there is a pattern. I know there is a meaning. We're just not seeing it. And now there was the first time that we could see it. And why? Because we did so much. And because it was well preserved, and we finally could do, for instance, males to females. And even though maybe their definition of male females, the whole gender, I don't know how they defined gender. Maybe not how we used to do it, maybe not how we see it today. Maybe they have their whole different interpretation, but you can't deny that something biological will influence that gender, right?
Because we've got that evidence. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and so what I think the challenge is that we are not kind of focusing on just the hard data, but always realizing they're people we're talking about. Yeah, we like to talk about individuals to objectify it, but actually we should go back sometimes to people. This woman, this man, and not suggesting that their gender was exactly what it suggests, but just, okay, this was a biological woman, but it was a woman. What was her thought? What was her task? What was her, So trying to make it a bit more personal, because in the end, if we claim to reconstruct people's behavior, we need to go back to people.
Absolutely. And this is, I think, some people, depending on where they see me commenting on social media or elsewhere, think sometimes I'm a bit of a killjoy, because I'm going, oh, this is a claim made. Well, maybe not, but I'm not. We should be making those pitches, but we should also be having those conversations openly. Yeah, I made this based on this evidence. What is your interpretation? So it's not about trying to shut down debate or suggest we shouldn't be having these conversations. But I'll stand on my own personal, current, beef about the fact that I'm not convinced that people of de-extinction direwolves or whatever it may be the latest scientific claim, but but it's part of this is part of the conversations we should be having. And that we make these arguments, other people say, oh well, what about the data from here which suggests something else, and then we can have that open, honest conversation. I think you're right.
And I think we shouldn't be afraid of thinking and having theories and being fully aware there is a theory. And if someone comes up and says, well, I have a new technique, we'll do the Pomerol thing. No, it's not Neolithic. It was definitely Roman. Okay, great. I'm happy I didn't suggest one or the other. But if I would have said, no, clearly Neolithic, I would be like, wow, these Romans also were crazy,
But but they all are. But equally, if we're not even looking for it, now we're looking for it. Now we've got the example that it may be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but one of these, I bet there's going to be another burial turn up, and people are going to now be looking for this rather than just assuming. And I bet that they've been missed in the past, because we're assuming it's a skeleton, it must be one person. The Clad Hallen remains and Knib and this, different periods, different times, different regions. But we're going to start seeing more of this because now we're looking, and we're looking because you've shared that information, and that's how we build our interpretations. I think it's fantastic stuff.
Yeah, I was really happy. I'm really fortunate to have been part of the amazing research. Yeah.
So, hey, I'm going to put in the description some of the links to the publications you've been talking about. So anyone who wants to find out more, you don't have to just rely on a YouTube video. You've got the links to the academic publications. But is there any final reflections you want to share with folks before we close?
Final reflections. I've reflected so much already.
I know. I mean, what do you think is what you're working on at the moment? Any sort of things upcoming? Any more?
I'm moving to a whole different continent now. So I'm moving to Egypt. Yeah. I've been. It's super cool site. It's a quarry site that provided the sandstone for the temples when they started switching to building temples from sandstone. And what I like about this site, it is a normal site. So, Joe and Julie were there with the kids, and then maybe not entirely voluntarily working there in the mines. And there is this glimpse in normal Egyptian society. So,
yes.
So seeing differences, so seeing some kind of social stratigraphy, but nothing super much. It's like, oh, that dude has 5 pots and I only have 3, so he must be more important than I am. But still, they're common pots.
It's not grand tombs of pharaohs.
No,
and
it's no gold
priests
involved.
and,
Yeah. So, and I like that. And but still, we see these clear difference in social stratigraphy. So I focused on the children now. So there were children buried inside the tombs and outside the tombs, and sometimes with varying care, in the sense that some had reed matting and all these scarabs going on, and all these grave goods, suggesting, again, an interpretation, suggesting, they were a bit better off. But you also have the ones that have nothing, just on the quarry floor, there, outside, that's it. And what I'm trying to see is to compare pathological anomalies. So seeing if one was, had maybe better food than the other, and if the pathologies are saying something to me, to be able to kind of mildly find that social organization within this kind of very normal population. So I find that very exciting. Again, I'm trying to see the identity of these normal Egyptian people, and I like it, giving them a face, bringing them forward instead, like you said, like the pharaoh. Well, good for the pharaoh, but the pharaoh had attention enough, so the normal people also get some attention. So that, and another one is that there are 2 individuals within that quarry site that have a specific lesion in the neck, suggesting they were basket carriers. So the ones that carry the rubble, they're absolutely lowest in line, because and they have all kinds of fractures in various stages of healing, suggesting that they frequently get a fracture and then just walk on and stuff like that. So again, these poor dudes working, I think, 24/7, and just having their spines deformed because of you carry like 40 kilograms of rubble on your head. Yeah, it's I don't know, so making them known and just putting it out there.
That is just amazing. Your skills are taking us across time and space.
Yes,
and continents now.
Yes,
it's really exciting.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm very excited about it.
Well, I don't want to close, but I just have to sort of stop somewhere
I
and say
know.
thank you so much for sharing these insights into your expertise and your ongoing work, Barbara. And I just hope we get to chat and in future about more of your ongoing
Yes.
research. But for
I was
now,
very happy to do it. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
thank you so much.
Follow ArchaeoDeath on YouTube, TikTok, WordPress, and a host of other social media.